Welcome to the day one recap version of Expected Buffalo, the podcast. Thank you very much for joining me on a Tuesday evening at 9:16 as we put a bow on day one of free agency. That all things considered, the Sabres did have a busy day. I am happy that we're at this point, to be honest. Um, not to complain, but this is the most tired I've probably been an entire off season. Like I am on fumes. I am wearing the shirt that I plan to wear to bed as soon as this is over, so I don't even care. I am comfortable, and we're gonna talk some Sabres hockey, and then I'm gonna go to sleep. And hopefully they get things wrapped up here over the next few days because mental break is much needed here with this team. But before we get into everything that happened, going all the way back to the draft, because I haven't had a podcast since then, let's go over our magnificent sponsors first. One Pie Pizza, onepiepizza.com, 2185 Clinton Street, open daily from 9 to 8. Breakfast pizzas and their well-known sweet sauce. Check them out, onepiepizza.com. And then Hiller and Comerford, hillerandcomerford.com, 1866 Hiller Law for your local injury and disability go-to. Okay, like I said, there's a lot to get into, especially, like I said, going all the way back to draft day itself, because the last time I was on here was pre-draft. So we'll go all the way back. But what I figured makes the most sense is we'll go in reverse chronological order. So we'll go with what happened today, and then we'll work our way back to the draft itself, and then we will finish with kind of an outlook of where we stand right now. So, like I said, we'll start with today, and we kind of just work our way through things. I'll fire some things off. I'll stop. There's really not a lot of to get into. There's not a lot of meat to grab at, but we'll still kind of go through here. Each one of these things pretty much in chronological order. First things first, that kicked off our day was the Sam Lafferty to Chicago Blackhawks for a 6th round pick. First of all, I mean, impressive that they were able to get anything for him in return. So you had a dead asset there that you moved off the roster and created cap space, which you eventually use on a different player, which we'll get to in a few minutes here. But overall, I mean, that's fine. That's a good move. They felt they needed to improve there, and that player was no longer a fit for them. So they went out and did that. Now, the funny part is the mantra of last summer is improving the fourth line, getting more difficult to play against. Well, 2 of the 3 players in Nicholas Aube-Kubel and now Sam Lafferty are no longer with the team. And you can make an argument that Beck Malenstein is staring himself at being the 13th forward on this team next season. Either way, he's probably rotational, whether he is 12th or 13th, but not all that great of a takeaway from last offseason. And then here we are again in the summer of 2025. And, well, we're talking about a team that needs to be more difficult to play against. And they're making moves to improve the bottom of the lineup and be tougher. So we can probably comfortably say, if you had any doubt, that last season was a failure. It wasn't good enough. And obviously last off season is what I meant, was a failure, and it wasn't good enough. The team didn't do enough moves, and now they're out here making similar moves instead of getting those core pieces to push them and close that 15 or 16 point gap from being a playoff team to where they are right now. So, but overall, getting back to Lafferty itself, good move, fine, creates cap space, gets a dead asset off your roster, and you go ahead and move about your day. Next one is the, oh my gosh, I believe I'm going to say this. The big UFA signing of the day for the Sabres was goaltender Alex Lyon, 2 years at a $1.5 million cap hit. All things considered, that's fine. we talked in here a few times if they were going to go out and get a goaltender. Everybody agreed that they should, but it was a conversation of, well, can you really improve? What are better options? How much is it going to cost? This is fine. This is a probably a better goaltender than Reimer. Uh, at least you would hope you would get similar results, which are about league average, which is usually what he gives you. Him being Alex Lyon for the majority of his career, he has been a plus goal save above expected goaltender for the last 3 years. I think, if I remember correctly, he ranks 36th among all goaltenders in evolving hockey's model when you combine the last 3 years. So it's, it's fine. It likely pushes Devin Levi down into the minors, which is not the worst thing in the world. I put in the article today that I went through, using Dustin Wolf from the Calgary Flames as a perfect example of the type of development path. Well, every single player, of course, is different. But to follow that goaltending development path, and when you look at it, Wolf played 166 AHL games when you include the playoffs for the Stampede, I believe is what they are in the AHL, or the Wranglers, one of the two. They're Calgary's AHL affiliate. He played 166 games, including playoffs, and then jumped to the NHL last season full time and was a Calder Trophy candidate. Levi has played. Oh, I should have had it up in front of me. I believe it was 61 games to this point. I'm going to pull it up right now. But I believe in the AHL to this point. He has played. I'm sorry, 81. He's played 81 AHL games to this point in his career in the AHL. If you put another full season on him, that gets you over that 100-game benchmark, closer to that 166 mark. And then next year, he should be good and ready to make the full jump into the NHL. And at that point, you might have a better read on who Luukkonen is, whether he's the goaltender we saw 2 years ago, or he's the goaltender that we saw last season, or if he's the goaltender that's someone in the middle of those two. And then it gives you the opportunity to make a better decision on what you want to do with Devin Levi. And then next year, if you have to waive Alex Lyon to be your AHL goalie, really not the end of the world. You can evaporate most of that cap hit because it's only $1.5 million. So really there's no downside there. They gave themselves protection. They did the smart play there. And I commend them for that, to realize that it's not okay to just go into the season with a 23-year-old unproven goaltender as the backup or 1B and a 25, 26-year-old goaltender that just struggles with consistency. They have somebody else in here that at the very least can be a break glass in case of emergency. I don't think you want him being your main starter, playing anywhere from 40 to 50 games, but I think you can count on him for roughly 30 and get, decent results all out of that. So Alex Lyon, good move. Approve of that. The other free agent move today we had, and this can be a Jarmo Kekalainen connection, is Justin Danforth, who comes over from the Carolina Hurricanes. He spent the better part of the last 4 years with them coming out of Europe. He actually spent 2 years with the Rochester Amerks before going to Europe. But Kekalainen brought him from Liga in Finland back to the NHL. He played a couple years up and down between the minors and the Blue Jackets. Last year was a full-time NHL player with the Blue Jackets. 9 goals, 21 points, I believe, if I remember correctly, in roughly 61 games. Undersized at 5'9", so kind of goes against their whole. We're going to get tall players over 6 foot to be on this team. Smaller guy, but really an energy guy. I guess you can think Benson with not as much skill. Has this better skater, he's faster skater with some speed, good forechecker, good motor, high energy, kind of just somebody if you think about, hate playing against because they're just going to be down your back all night long. So, I think there's nothing more there, to be honest, than a 12th or 13th forward, probably a rotational forward in your lineup, in and out. You could do much worse there. $1.8 million, which is $200,000 cheaper than what you would have paid Lafferty to play in that similar role. And you, I believe, got a better player here. So, another one that, okay, sure, it's not going to move the needle. Alex Lyon's not going to move the needle. And then here we are at 926, and that's it on the free agent market. Really, there's not a lot left out there. There's Nikolai Ehlers, but it seems that's down to Carolina or the Capitals. There's Priest Suter, who I think the Sabres have some interest in, but I just don't know. Look at their forwards roster now. Like, I don't know where you would fit him. So that probably doesn't make sense. And, Granlund signed. Dmitry Orlov is one that I'd probably keep an eye on, depending what happens with Byram here. And we'll get to Byram in a little bit, but I think if Byram ends up moving, Orlov is somebody that I would keep an eye on. Gut feel, to be perfectly clear and transparent. I'm not saying I know anything there. Just a gut feel that it's a fit. Left side can play your top four. I think the cap hit isn't going to kill you there. Short term contract most likely. So yeah, I think that's somebody to keep an eye on. Moving away from unrestricted free agency, the Sabres actually had an extremely busy day when we get into their restricted free agents. They signed 1, 2, 3 of them, and I guess 4 if you want to count Jack Quinn the other day. So they cleaned up a lot of their restricted free agencies. Tyson Kozak and Ryan Johnson both signed 3-year contracts for $775,000 per year, of course. Kozak one is a two-way deal, a two-way contract in year 1, and then a one-way contract in year 2 and 3. And why that is interesting and is worth noting, because Kozak requires waivers to go down to the AHL. If their intention, and if you go by him being in a two-way contract this season, is to put him down in the AHL if he doesn't make the team, is that by tacking on those 2 years of guaranteed money, being NHL dollars, whether he is in the NHL or the AHL, makes him more unlikely for teams to claim him through waivers. So that is one of the ways that you can prevent or push teams off of claiming him off of waivers by adding those things into his contract. So that was a savvy move on their part. And of course, Kozak, I think, deserved it anyways, but it helps in that regard. And Johnson is your straight, from what I saw, just a one-way contract, $775K. I wonder if he does compete for a roster spot. That's the argument I guess that can be made against not qualifying Bernard Docker, which we will get to that next. But yeah, so good to get those wrapped up. Jack Quinn is the one, like I said a couple of days ago. 2 years, $3.3 million. That is actually exactly the evolving hockey projection. So some people might have thought that was a bit of an overpay, but actually by market value, it's not. He did score points, even though he did not play that well last season overall. You got to pay if people score points. And the plan there just simply has to be you're banking on, a bounce back. It seems right now that they are going to plan on him being, the very least, in the middle six of their lineup. And if nothing else happens, they're going to count on him to replace a good chunk of JJ Peterka scoring that is out the door now. Risky business, but that's what the Sabres do. They gamble with their internal players and hope that it can bail them out. And looks like they're going to do that again with Jack Quinn. The last one, Ryan McLeod. That's the big one. 4 years, $5 million. I wrote in my article last night that they spent the better part of a week or 2 weeks exchanging offers, really working away at this contract. I didn't think it would happen today, but they got it done, and that's a good, again, market value. Evolving Hockey's projections, that's pretty much what they had. I think they might have had 5.5, so maybe the Sabres got a little bit under. So good to have McLeod back. There's a possibility that he could be your 2C if Josh Norris can't stay healthy or if Kulich isn't up to it. Ideally, he's a really strong third-line center that I think they have the pieces as wingers they can put around him and put together a decent third line for a two-way game, and I think even to add some offense too. So Ryan McLeod getting in the mix is excellent there on their part. Now, to the player that they did not qualify in Jacob Bernard Docker, he signed a 1-year contract with the Troy Red Wings today for $875K. It's really, going to choose my words very carefully here because, like I said, I'm tired and a little bit cranky at 9:30 at night, so I don't want to say things that I'm going to regret. But I think here's the thing with this. Bernard Docker, it's not the end of the world that he wasn't qualified. Should you have held on to a right shot defenseman that is only worth $875,000 on your cap for depth purposes? Probably. I don't think you had to get rid of him. But having said that, it's not the end of the world. And there's some who will gaslight fans into thinking that, they're overvaluing the player and all that. That's not really what's happening here. The disappointment that I have, and I think many, is the misuse of assets that has now started to pile. If it's one time, you forget about it. If it's two times, it becomes a trend. If it's three times, it becomes a problem. So when we look at kind of these moves here over the last little bit, going all the way back to that move at the deadline, the second round pick that they added into that trade, the assumption was, perhaps incorrectly, but we'll get to why it doesn't make it better in a minute. But the assumption was that the second round pick in 2026 was added by the Sabres as a way to get their hands on Bernard Docker. They had faith, as a 24-year-old right shot defenseman, that he could be, either a bottom pair or even he played with Owen Power and looked really good in that little window and kind of stabilized, Power, who was having an up and down season, and the two of them worked together. And that could have been something you went to if Kesserling didn't work or one of your other options you have here, or Timmins, doesn't work, then you had Bernard Docker in your back pocket, but that's no longer an option for them. Okay, well, maybe you can make the argument that, well, the second wasn't just for Bernard Docker because, he's gone. And that, you could say that it was a flop of Gilbert for Bernard Docker. Okay, fine. But that doesn't make adding the second round pick any better. It actually makes it worse. Because then what that comes off as, and again, we're going revisionist, we're going back to this trade. You added a second round pick with Dylan Cousins to get Josh Norris. You added a second round pick to get a more expensive player. You added a second round pick to get a player that plays less. That's not okay. And I will make the full argument. And I understand that when healthy, when he plays, Norris is probably the better player. But the difference between Norris and Cousins is not the value of a second round pick, especially when you add in all of the other concerns. You essentially just set an asset on fire, and it's, the numbers guy here, of course, is like, I get it. A 30% chance or less you're going to get an NHL player with that pick in the second round. But I mean, you're getting rid of top 40, top 50 picks in drafts. It's going to come back and get you at some point. But like, it's not only just the draft pick itself and the opportunity to draft a player. You lose an asset that you can use for multiple things. Maybe you can use it to go get a guy like Jordan Spence, who the Ottawa Senators acquired for draft picks. Maybe you can use it to move around in the draft, to move back into the first round if you like somebody. You can use it as an offer sheet threat. Now, your offer sheet threat has been eliminated because you don't have a partially eliminated because you don't have a 2026 second round pick. Now you fast forward to this offseason, which I guess is a pretty good transition into the next trade we're going to talk about, going back to the draft a little bit here, is the Connor Clifton trade. You've now traded your 2026 second round pick, and then you move 39th overall as part of a cap dump to get Connor Clifton off your roster. And of course, you get Connor Timmins and you get the AHL defenseman. But you've, in theory, again, this is the working theory here, it's not clean and perfect, you have divested 2 second round picks in bottom pair right shot defensemen. And now you only have one on your roster. that's where it all comes together. And then if you go back to last season, they traded their 2024 second round pick to one of them to get Beck Malenstein. And I understand that this team shouldn't be so focused on draft picks. They ended up making 9 picks overall in this class, which is a lot to add to your prospect pool. But really, kind of, if you look at the development camp roster, was a showcase of all of a sudden how thin they have become at forward in their prospect pool. Yes, Kulik and Benson are here. They're young players. They're in the NHL now. But beyond that, in terms of high-end potential prospects, you have Noah Ostlund and you have Konsta Helenius. And that is it. That is it. And they picked a lot of defensemen in this last draft. So there's no other high-end forward that comes in. Again, people are tired of talking about prospects. I get it. I understand. But for me, the way I look at some of these things is that I'm thinking about already the next general manager who's in charge. That's what I'm thinking about. And I'm thinking about the pieces that are lost here. So next summer, if a new general manager takes over, he doesn't have a second round pick 2026. I guess really the only thing. But, Peterka is now off this roster. And we'll see what happens with Byram. What else goes with him, or if that's just a sole move, or, what else will happen there too. But really that's been a lot of my focus. And that's why, the article I wrote before everything started off here of, what if they kind of just reset things here a little bit and they didn't just fire through some assets. Now, thankfully, they didn't go nuts and they didn't burn through a lot. So, it's not the end of the world by any means. The next general manager should be able to function and do his job without a second round pick. I'm not saying that it's a big problem, but it's a pattern. It's a pattern of not getting value. Peterka is another example. While you got decent players that we all can agree that we like in Kesselring and Doan, it doesn't feel like you got complete total value for Peterka. It feels like you left stuff on the table there to target what you actually are going to do. You're so focused on one thing in terms of being, that right shot defenseman that you left things on the table. And we talked about that last one episode. I'm not going to get into all that again. And I kind of went way off with Bernard Docker and this whole Clifton thing. So I got to rope it back in here. But yeah, I mean, that's the overall thing. It really gets back down to asset management, and it's becoming a pattern. It's not something that I noticed previously, but really I think as you become more desperate and try to make these swings, you open yourself up for more mistakes because you can't properly build your roster. So you're narrow focused, and that's what happens. You get caught in these situations where you make trades for just a specific piece. You don't move Bo Byram, and now a team threatens you with an offer sheet and locks you into a headlock that you can really only deal with them now because you didn't plan or execute the things in the proper timing that you needed to do. So all of that kind of all comes together, and really to get past the Clifton and Timmins thing. That main trade, that's a fine trade. I think Timmins can fit here just fine as a third pair right shot defenseman. I am begging you to please do not try to push him up the lineup to play 20-something minutes with Darlene. We don't need to do that. And that is the thing. That is the thing they always do. They always get these guys and shove them up rolls. and hope that it works out, and it really never does. Kesselring, I think, is enough of a borderline top four defenseman that you can push him to your second pair and be fine. Taking Timmins, and I understand that he played 15 games with Erik Karlsson in Pittsburgh, but taking Timmins and trying to throw him to play consistently 20 plus minutes a night with Lyon against the best players on the opponent, you're putting yourself in a bad spot to get full value out of that player. Make the moves to get players to play in proper roles. It shouldn't be that difficult to do that. So, all right, let's move on. I spent too much time on that. Roddy Merca, their first round pick. I don't think we need to spend a ton of time there. I'm fine with the pick. It's really just for me. I think it's the setting of proper expectations that people didn't, I think, completely understand when I was saying he was a developmental prospect. And what I meant by that is usually top 10 picks, you can see them in the NHL roughly within 2 years. Merca, on the other hand, here, I think you have a guy who's 3, possibly 4 years away. And I could be wrong on that, but a lot of people that you talk to that know these players very well, including Austin, our very own prospect guy, agrees with me. And it's not that the ceiling isn't there. I think the ceiling is quite high for a 6'6" defenseman that has the skill set that he has. And of course, being a right shot defenseman, I think that the ceiling is there if he's developed properly. There was just so much on his game that he needs to work on. He needs to work, I think, on his lateral movement. I think he needs to be better positionally. I think his passing under pressure is rough at times. And, I had the full list. I think I put somewhere, but I'm running out. I'm blanking. Those in the cell. So 4 things that I think he needs to improve upon. And there's no need to rush it. Develop him properly. Take your time. And I think you're going to be rewarded for the player that you pick there. If you rush him, if you try to force him in, whether it be the AHL, whether it be the NHL, I think you're going to have problems. And I think you're going to be upset with what you get there because you just didn't take your time because you were overeager. But overall, I don't really have a big issue with the pick. It kind of made sense in what I thought they would go, especially with their trend of we need to get big defensemen. He just falls right into that trend, and there we are. Okay, let's get to the big topic that I think everybody wants to talk about. Bowen Byram. Bo Byram is still on this team as of 9:44 on July 1st. Not what I would have expected. I thought he was going to go before the 1st of July. I said that I believed that if he got through July 1st, that the odds of him staying on this team would increase. I'm telling you now that I'm sitting here and I actually feel it's more likely that he's moved today than I did yesterday. I think they are working away at trying to get that done. I think they would have liked to get that done today. There's not much that I think I'd feel comfortable just putting out there right now. I think that'd be a little bit irresponsible. I think the offer sheet thing was real. Not that he was of course wasn't presented with one. But I think there's a team that was serious about it, and now I think it might have locked them into dealing with one specific team. And I think with that opportunity there, it seems, and I could be wrong, it seems that it would be difficult for him to come back here if he is aware that there was another team out there that he might have more interest in going to that would give him a contract. Now, the flip side of that is if it's a contract the Sabres would be willing to match, then you're in a tough spot, especially if it's long-term, that he would then be stuck in Buffalo for at least the next year at the very least, because once you match an offer sheet, you can't trade that player for 1 year. So he would at least be tied to the Sabres for 1 year. It's a sticky situation that they've set themselves into this point to try to wiggle their way out and figure out. I'm curious. I think tomorrow we get a resolution on it, one way or the other, with him staying or leaving. It seems like the Sabres want to get a lot of their business done this week and have their roster pretty much set, and then go into the rest of the summer with, you know, if something falls in our lap, we'll make it work, but we're pretty comfortable with our roster. I think and a lot of teams do that. They try to get a lot of the work done this week, and then, something else comes up over the next 2 months, and they'll take a look at it and see if that improves their team. No, I'm not going to go any deeper in it. So yeah, we'll see where Byram goes tomorrow, if he goes tomorrow. Uh, I feel like we'll get a resolution tomorrow, but again, I felt like he would have been going here for a week, so this could also drag on here. So I guess we will see what tomorrow will bring, in that regard. But overall, stepping back, taking a full outlook at where we are right now, the Sabres themselves have, let's see, $13.7 million in cap space. I'm making sure everybody on here is signed. Yes, they is. So Puckpedia has them at $13.7 million, with the only restricted free agents being Connor Timmins and Bo Byram. If you give Byram and Timmins, Byram, I have, let's say, $7 million, Timmins at 1.5. That would leave you with $5.2 million remaining in cap space. It's not 7, it's not 8, but 5 is still an NHL player that you're not adding to your roster. Now, if they move Byram for a futures deal similar to what we saw with K'Andre Miller and the Carolina Hurricanes, because that kind of played out with like a similar situation with the offer sheet threat from the Hurricanes. If we see a more futures laden deal and you don't have Byram on the team, or you add a player with a low salary, then you're looking at between $10 and $12 million in cap space. If this team is sitting here with $10 to $12 million of cap space, even let's say Byram is traded and next Tuesday they have $10 million in cap space, wildly, completely unacceptable. And I don't want to hear from any other person ever that there's not some sort of salary restriction. And to be clear, there is a full path here where they can use the majority of this cap space still. They can sign somebody else, they can trade for somebody else that carries more money. I'm not saying they can't do it, but I'm just telling you, if we get to next week and there is around $10 million in cap space, man, I don't know. It's again, I said it last year when they didn't use the Skinner money. It's a slap in the face of fans, and it would be another one. Just a no. They just don't care. They are going to spend what they're going to spend and put a roster on the ice and shove some money in their pocket that isn't used. And they'll sell you on, of course, if we can find a guy or we can make a trade early in the season, and that whole good thing there. But it won't happen, essentially. But let's just, for now, how do I want to do this? Let's do this way. Let's just say that Byram is back. Timmins is signed. Roster is set. Okay, you're done. That's it. This is your roster. While I am fine with every move they made today, I can live with the Peterka deal, but I said it was with the caveat. The caveat was they did something to replace Peterka. And I've seen in the comments a few people have mentioned, well, maybe this is a goals scored swap for a goals against swap. Sure, perhaps, but scoring matters in this league. You have to score more goals than the opponent to win games. And I understand they're thinking of, well, if we play better defense, then our goaltending's going to be better. We don't get to score as many goals. But you removed 28 goals and almost 70 points from your roster, and you didn't replace it. The two forwards you added were Josh Doan and Justin Danforth. That can't just be overlooked as a swap. That it's okay. We got better defensively. It'll all work out because it simply won't. It simply will not. And really, I understand that Paterka was not the best defensive player. Fully get it. But if you look at Evolving Hockey's model, he was their best standing points above replacement player last year. 4.7. Best on the team. Are you telling me that Kesselring and Doan have fully replaced that? Because I'm not sure that they did. If anything, let's just say, if anything, those two players are a wash. You miss by 15 points. More, maybe. How did you close the gap? You didn't do anything else. Like, adding Kesselring is not going to make your defense 20 points better. So it's this. We get to this point every single year with this front office team. Every year. It's you sit here and you say, I like some of the moves they did. I can get behind them. They make sense. Okay. Well, but where is my over the top move? Where is my move that pushes me to be better? Like, I can't for the fourth year in a row listen to Jack Quinn, Benson, power playing better, internal improvements. I can't. You got it one time. You missed by a point. You decided the way that worked, that doesn't make any sense. So we're just going to try to run away from that for the next 2 years and create a roster that's different than the one that got us within a point. And we're going backwards. Just the gap is too big and there's been nothing significant done. And I can't fully say that they have failed because it is July 1st and I give you the first week of July before I can say it could fully fail. But really, sitting here, why should I believe that this is the time? None of us should. None of us should be duped into believing that this is the time in 6 years. They're going to get it. They're going to put that big move over the top. I bet you when we hear Kevin Adams talk tomorrow, he is going to discuss how he likes his roster, how it is. They like the players that they added. They believe XYZ player can step in and fill in, and they will sing songs and poems of Josh Norris being on this team full time. Hopefully you get more than 40 games out of him. What if Josh Norris does get hurt again? What do you do? There's no backup at center. It all falls then on a 21-year-old kid who might himself even struggle. What if Cooley can't step up to it? Ryan McLeod's supposed to be your second-line center? Sure, you can move Tage back to center, but not look at your wing depth then. Then you're depleted on the wing. It's just they don't ever set themselves up if something goes wrong. They always put themselves in a tight window where everything has to go right. And if everything goes right, then there's a chance we could be a playoff team. A chance. Not even like this is definitely a playoff team. There is no way that anybody reasonably can look at that roster put together right now and tell me that is a playoff team. That roster is better than Ottawa Senators. That roster is better than, I don't know, the team out of the Metro Division. That would be your first, second wild card team. They're not. They're not. And I really truly hope that this Byram thing happens. Maybe they get a better return than I'm expecting. Maybe it's not a futures loaded return, or maybe if they do a futures return, they're savvy enough to take those futures and flip it for something else. But it's hard for me to get there. It's hard for me to get there, and it's not the spot. I'm telling you, like I dislike how I don't know if the right word is negative, but maybe it is. I've become about this, and I try to be as positive as I can. I try to be as down the middle as I can, but you get cynical with it. 6 years. 2 or 3 years ago, I could sell my stuff. I could sell myself on, it's okay because they could do this, or you have this guy coming, or this prospect coming. It's all of that, but I can't. 6 years in, you can't do it. Can't do it. And I see Rosie in the chat here trying to make the argument: if you lose your first line center, you're fine. Most teams don't trade for a first line center that only plays like 40 to 50 games a season. And if you do that, then you damn sure better have a backup plan to that. You are getting a player that has injury problems. You better build in a backup plan. If you don't, then you know what? When you fail, it's on you. It's 100% on you. So, I don't want to end on negativity and sour grapes notes here. Like I said, I was fine with a lot of their moves that they made today. The restricted free agent signings were good, and I think that's the disappointing part. That it always just like I'm fine, but it never just gets to that last spot. They always just leave you a move short. That is what they are known for. They are always one move short at the end of the day. But we have 5-6 days, the rest of the week, to figure this out, see what else they can do. And like I mentioned in the beginning, there's some free agents that are still out there that I think could help this team. Dmitry Orlov, Puig Suter, talking about mentioning a center. That's something that you can do. And Nikolai Ehlers for sure isn't going to happen. That'd be awesome, but he's down to those two teams, like I mentioned. It seems the Capitals and Hurricanes. But there are players that they can go find. I don't think Jack Roslovic signed anywhere, so you're starting to scrape the bottom of the barrel there. But I think he could help you, and he's a guy who maybe could play dual positions of wing and center. Maybe you're asking a lot for him to be a center, but he's a little bit insurance built in there. So, no need to get all doom and gloom yet. There's still a couple days. We'll let them finish out the couple days, and then we'll see where we're at next week when we probably have the final podcast for a couple weeks. And I'll probably make Anthony come on with me there, so I have somebody to go through it with, and it's not just me talking for 45 minutes. All right. Like I said, I am worn, tired. I am tired. I really pushed myself to my limit for sure over the last 2 months with everything, and for the first time in years, I'm gonna welcome the break when it comes here. I'm not gonna be the guy who goes to a cottage or anything by any means. I don't have those capabilities, but it'll probably be like a week or two that just step away and take a breath, and then I don't know, we hang out for a couple months. We talk about prospects, we do some deep dives on some things with the roster, and wait until we get to the point of training camp and start to get ready for a new season. So I thank you everybody for listening. I thank you everybody for following along the last couple of weeks as everything has started to ramp up here. I appreciate all the support for the site and the team at Expected Buffalo. You know, our Discord really has exploded over the last couple of weeks. You know, it's a good group. It's fun, good conversations, fun conversations in there. We even at times hit each other with pool noodles, arguing about the silliness of this team. But at the end of the day, it's all, it's everybody love everybody. That's the theme in there. So Discord channel has been awesome. Shout out to the Discord group in there. And the site itself, we've had the best 2 months in year 4 or 5. Year 4, I think. Either way, year 4 or 5, we've had the best 2 months from a viewing perspective that we've had. And that to me is crazy. And that to me should be a sign, as I'm starting to lose my voice here, should be a sign to the team itself that there is still a ton of interest here. Even though a lot of that has been beat out of fans, there is still a lot of interest here. And if the winning team is put on the ice, I think this market is still there to be fully invested in this hockey team. And hopefully that happens one day. Because, for me, it'd be fun to cover a winner. I've been doing this for 7-8 years, and we've only got close one time. At least I can say I've been doing it for 14 years, because then I might just have to stop, and because probably I would be the reason for them not making the playoffs. But at least I have 7 to 8 years of it that I lived through. So I would enjoy a playoff run to see what that's like for sure. Because when we got close the one year a couple years ago, that was fun. That was fun the last few weeks of the season. Every game meant something, and we all had a good time. All right, I'm just rambling now here at the end. So thank you everybody for listening again. Like I said, one more, well, maybe two, depending on if what happens over the next day or two. But at least one more full wrap podcast before we take a few weeks off and head into the dog days of the off season and just hang out. So thanks for listening. Maybe we have a fun few weeks or fun few days before we get to the off season, and then we can all kind of reset and get ready for next year. All right, I will hopefully talk to you soon, because we'll have something fun to talk about. That means if not, then we will talk next week to do a full recap and bow on the 2025's off season. Thanks for listening. See ya.